Okay. First question from Daniel. How could we ace a good storyboard portfolio? Any tips on storyboard creating a portfolio?
That's a good question. Ashlyn, do you want to go first?
Yeah. So one thing I always, for a little bit, I was like a judge in the Nickelodeon talent. What was the story?
The story like trainee program thing?
Trainee program. So one thing to think about is that the person looking at your portfolio doesn't have a lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
And they also are going to be looking at a lot of portfolios during the day. So you want to make, first of all, you want to make your portfolio as easy to access as possible. Eventually, what I ended up for my portfolio is just giving people a series of PDFs in a Dropbox, because honestly, that's a really quick and simple way to flip through files.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I sort of landed on maybe 100 to 150 storyboards per segment. You don't want to be giving people 1,000 storyboards to look at. They're not going to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
People don't have a lot of time to look at storyboards, and they know right off the bat within 50 panels if you can handle it or not. Label your files, what they are, what they're from. Is it a 6 to 11 board? Would you consider this board clean? Would you consider this board rough? Is it from a scripted show? Is it your original idea? Put this in the front panel too if you can. Just something to give people an idea, like right off the bat, what they're looking at, are all just ways that you can like organize your files so that when people are looking at them, they're not going to have to hunt down this information.
Mm-hmm.
I think seems like it doesn't have anything relating to storyboarding, but like is just going to, I think, help you make your portfolio really manageable for somebody to look at. Because your drawing skills are going to be what they're going to be, but like having somebody flip through like portfolio after portfolio, there are so many times where I would like click on somebody's website and be like, oh, I just can't click through these files and I can't see what I'm trying to look at. Mm-hmm. What do you think, Cheyenne?
Yeah, no, everything you're saying is super true. I would like to add, know if you're applying to a specific boarding show, like a show, like know if it's like comedy or action, because if it's like a comedy, script-driven show and your boards are all like super crazy action, like that could be cool, but it might not be exactly what they're looking for. So if you're a person who loves comedy and doesn't like to do action boards, then you should probably really kind of stick to that, like stick to what you love. Like it's kind of like just be authentic, because it's hard enough to board for a show that you love, let alone something that you're like, I don't know how to do the action stuff and I hate this and I have to draw cars and what am I doing? Because that's hard. And then,
mm-hmm.
And also, yeah, like TV boards are so different from feature boards. So, if you're applying for like more of a feature position, kind of know the difference. That's a whole other topic.
Mm-hmm.
It does help. Like, I think it's hard when you first start because you don't usually have a lot of like examples to draw from. Like, I know when I first started, it was like hard to like gather examples.
Sure.
Because like I would have to do boards in my spare time. Like I'd have to like come up with an idea and then board something. But eventually what I sort of like landed on is like having, I mean, this sounds crazy, but like having 10 different PDFs of different kinds of boards and knowing what I was going to submit for which job.
Sure.
Really does help.
Yeah, there's different shows for,
Yeah.
depending on if it's a kid show or an adult show or whatever. There's action shows, there's comedy shows, there's, there's a lot of adult cartoons that are kind of, obviously more adult. That might not have as much action. It might just be kind of, characters really kind of talky. Kid shows will probably have a lot more action or not as much, talking sequences. So yeah, like Ashlyn's saying, just have a good variety to your portfolio.
Yeah.
From Augustine, what do you recommend not having in a storyboard portfolio? Ditto for character design.
Really long boards.
Yeah. Like Ashlyn said at the very beginning, like just nothing that's takes an hour to read.
Let's see, for character design, like I think there's a difference between submitting a portfolio for a specific job and then having like your website. Because like with a lot of websites, you know, you'll have like, oh, this is like my sketchbook stuff. Oh, this is like some like experimental painting that I did. Like that's totally cool to have there. But I think like if you are submitting a character design portfolio, it's not a good idea to put like backgrounds in there unless you're like, oh, I did a character and also put in this background. Like, you know, or don't do these like colored full painting like stuff. It's just, they're not looking for that. They're looking for, you know, like your fundamentals and your rotations and all that. And same for storyboarding, you know, like if you're sending it to like a show that's a comedy show and you're putting in these like crazy, like I did this in gouache, you know, backgrounds. It's like, okay, cool. Put that on your website, you know?
Yeah, it's sort of like a weird, I feel like when I was in school, we had this like era of like, yeah, you put in like life drawing and like this and this and like really like for jobs, they just want to see like what you can do for the job. Like,
yeah, like I've seen I've seen character design portfolios with like gesture drawings in the back and like that, you know, that's cool too. I like, depends on the showrunner. Maybe some showrunners are like, yes, I need to see these like super cool gesture drawings, but you know, just have like, just know what you're applying for.
Yeah.
Quick question. Is there a difference in a portfolio for a storyboard or a storyboard revisionist?
Well, I think with revisions, like you're always going to want to eventually become a board artist. So it's like if you kind of treat it like I'm a board artist, you know, and get into that mindset. But you know, yeah, like if like have some rough stuff, have some clean stuff, kind of treat it like a full board position.
How rough is too rough for a board artist, and and how much time do you spend per board when storyboarding? A real quick answer for me: how rough is too rough? If you can't tell what character you're looking at, that's too rough.
That's a great answer.
Which I've had board panels come in where I can't tell what character it is, and I'm like, you guys need to revise this, please.
I once drew a really ugly board, and then later Nickelodeon like put it on their like screens everywhere for this thing, and then somebody commented on the Nickelodeon YouTube channel. They were like, is this how rough storyboards are allowed to be?
Yeah, it was like a joke.
Girl. I was like, why did you do this? This is not supposed to be seen. How rough is too rough? Yeah, I mean, it depends on the showrunner. Also, like, I feel like the first panel in every scene should be really clean and like blocked. And then sometimes they can be rough, like if you're just posing between.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's a good rule of thumb.
Yeah, and like shows are different. Like the rotation I'm on now is 4 weeks total per board.
Is that for 11-minute?
For 11-minute. Amphibia was 5 weeks. So, you know, your first 2 weeks you spend roughing out the whole thing. And those roughs could be from 0 roughs, you know, so they could go from like basic stick figures with, you know, like, okay, this is Anne, you know, look at her hair. And then, you know, so just enough information so that the directors and showrunners know what you're doing. And then 2 weeks after that, 2.5 weeks after that is like all cleanup and like revisions and stuff.
And then how about a 22-minute?
I don't know, I never worked on a 22.
Oh, okay.
I've done a few. I've done 6 weeks for 22.
Oh my God.
Like 2-week check-ins. Yeah. I mean, I've done a few where it's like, you're just like the whole time you're like sprinting. Yeah. Cause it's like tight, clean too. Yeah. I mean, it just like depends too. Cause some shows, by the way, like I've worked on 3D shows where we never had to take it to clean because 3D, you don't have to worry about how clean it is. But if you're taking it, for example, to So a 3D show versus a 2D show. A 2D show, they would eventually need to clean up those poses and then put them into animation. So it's more important that your boards are clean so that they can like actually draw over those poses. But for a 3D show, it doesn't really matter because they're just going to be taking the models and like moving them around. So that was like kind of a huge adjustment for me going from a 3D show back to a 2D show, because I wasn't used to like cleaning up my boards. So I'd gotten like a little bit lazy with like board cleanup. Yeah, so like I think that's like also a difference, like how rough is too rough. Like for 3D, you can be like, it's a stick figure. He's in this shot. Like, that's it.
Good.
Deal with it.
From Sydney, for storyboarding, what kind of story shows off your skills the most?
Depends
what kind
what
of
your skills are.
Depends on what kind of story you want to tell.
Yeah.
But really, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, like I don't do action. I hate
action.
I hate it.
I'm tired of it.
I can't do it. I don't like it. So I tend to go more towards like comedy and cartoony. So that's what that's like my strengths are. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, we kind of answered this, but how long should it take to draw a panel? It depends, really.
A single panel?
A single panel, or how much?
1,000 years.
Yeah.
It depends. Like for rough, you could just do like a super quick gesture, and then for cleanup, like it shouldn't, like for TV boarding, your panel shouldn't take super long time for each panel.
Yeah, you're doing anywhere from like 300 to 800 panels in a storyboard to 1,000 sometimes.
Yeah.
A thick board. Yeah.
Yeah. So you don't want to take too long on each panel.
From KC, do storyboard artists need to do any kind of research when boarding a scene? Example, a time period scene, needing period correct assets. Is that a responsibility for the board artist to find?
Yeah.
I find that I like usually, especially at the beginning of a show too, there's a lot of like layout and research of like how the scene is set up, especially because the particular project I'm on now, I'm on the finale of the end of a show. So I have to know what the layout of the house that I'm in looks like, even though, because it's already been designed. So like, what are the objects that are in the house? Where are they placed? What are the characters that are there? What do they look like? Where are they in the house? Where can I place the camera? So those are kind of like basic things. As far as like research into like eras, it's more often like, so I recently worked on like one of the new Adventure Time specials, and like it's kind of more like, well, what fits into this world, and what can and can't I use in this world? And I think that like sometimes is designed and sometimes isn't. So like often if you're on a show that's been around for a while, they'll have a library of stuff you can draw from. And you won't have seen any of it because you just got on the show like 2 days ago. And so you have to go hunting inside this like library of files. Or you have to just make up a bunch of stuff and kind of get approval from your director. Like, can I use this? Can I use that? The thing about all the research that you're doing is often you have a director and a showrunner where you can be like, hey, is it okay if I do this? Is this what the kitchen looks like? Is this what the shack looks like? Is this what the X looks like? So I think that's like sort of the research that I've done. I've never had to do like library research though, except for pitches.
Yeah, I think like I literally have to look up every single time how to draw a bike. Like, like Google image research for like everything. Like, what's a drum set look like? What's a helmet look like? Like stuff that like you think you know what things look like, and then you try and draw them, and you don't know what they look like.
Yeah, there's probably a lot of Google image searching for characters wearing props and stuff. Have you both had to draw cars in boards?
It's the worst. I hate drawing cars. I just do like Google SketchUp and like trace it.
Oh, and helmets, because your character always has to wear a helmet.
Yep. No matter what they're driving, they have to wear a helmet. Any advice on time management and getting the amount of work done per day? How do you keep yourself productive?
Oh yeah, that's a good one. I think just it could be really intimidating at first because you're like, oh my god, I have 13 pages to board, and I have this minute, like I have 4 weeks, I can't do this. Try to kind of. I like to kind of jump around a little bit. Like sometimes I'll leave the scenes that I feel like are really like complicated and difficult. I kind of leave those just for a bit later until I feel warmed up. So I'll tend to gravitate more towards like simpler scenes and maybe just like dialogue or stuff that I'm gravitating towards, and then kind of getting that stuff out of the way and saving the really hard stuff. Like some people don't do this. People are like, no, do the hard stuff first, and then it'll be a breeze. But as long as you're really hitting your deadlines, like some people work really well, from like 3 to 6, and then like that's like their like main chunk time. Some people work really well in the morning. So I think just knowing when you work the best, and if you're going through like personal stuff, like just really communicating that with your directors and like your production, like your crew, just being like, hey, like something crazy happened this week, this might be a little late, or could I have a bit extra time, or like don't just take everything on your shoulders and then not get things done and then just disappear, like, because everybody wants to help you, everybody wants to get this stuff done.
Yeah.
Nobody wants you to be suffering. So communicating.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm a big to-do list person and like planner person, especially like a paper planner. So I like to write out everything I'm going to do that day on a sheet of paper. And I also have like a weekly planner. You can get a bit like nutty with it. But I think it does help to like sort of like set yourself like what manageable goals, obviously, like of like what you're going to do each day. And I'm also like a really big fan of like doing a little bit of everything a day. Like I'll do like my storyboarding work, but I'll also try to make sure that I'm doing some picture book stuff as well, because I think doing like 14 hours of storyboarding sounds the worst thing ever, but doing 6 hours of storyboarding and then 2 hours of picture books and then an hour of Animal Crossing sounds like a dream. And I think that if you like really like try to figure out what your goals are and like what your long-term goals are, and like if you can break them up into like manageable steps for yourself, how you can achieve that. Some people do work better if they like do everything in one go. Like if you are somebody that like once you're going, it's easier for you to do like a 14-hour workday. I'm just using that as an example. You probably shouldn't work for 14 hours. But if you can work in 4-hour stints, maybe you do 4 hours of storyboarding and then 4 hours of this. It just depends on the person. Like I think unfortunately it takes a while to like learn what kind of worker you are, like what kind of artist you are.
From Abigail, I've been seeing a lot of boards that are almost animatics circling around. How important is editing for the job / a portfolio?
Oh, that's such a controversial topic.
Boo hiss.
That's the answer.
I've definitely seen.
That's my answer.
I've seen boards that are almost animated. Yeah.
I don't think it really matters for me, but I don't really like action stuff, so that's not really my wheelhouse, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like some shows really want you to pose out a lot of stuff. Some shows are like, stop animating your boards, because when we send that to overseas, there's like a million poses, and like they usually work pose to pose and animate between that, so it kind of messes up the animation side of it. It really depends on the show you're on. I don't think as board artists we should be animating our boards. I think that's like 2 jobs in one, and it puts so much pressure on us to learn how to be like animators, and we're not. We're doing like the strongest pose that we need to, but like people who do these like, you know, like settles and this and that, like it makes the board look super amazing. And I wish we had the time to do that, but we don't. But if you have the time to do it, and I know some amazing board artists who do that, and you know, that's good for their boards, but
I think some board artists can't help it. Like I'm setting something in the chat right now. This is, you know, Benjamin Arcand or Arcand, or this is pretty much an animated Squidward scene, but like that he just prefers to get really into it.
I think for some jokes it's worth it. Like if it really sells the joke, and do it. But I do think, and I think for action, like if you're really into action, I know that on the action side of things, like I mean like sword fighting shows or just action shows, you know what I'm talking about, fighting, you're going to need more of that. But I agree with Cheyenne. Like I think that it isn't necessary for comedy. I don't think it's necessary for a lot of things. And I think that if you do it poorly, I don't think it's gonna work in your favor. I think if you're adding poses for the sake of adding poses, it's not gonna look good. I think if you're adding poses to sell a joke, or if you're adding poses to sell an action, it will look cool and it will work well.
I agree.